One secret that I learned from the best leaders in writing this book is they speak the language of equals. So it's not about status. I'm up here and you're down here. They're giving people chances to give input early on. They're asking before they tell.
What do leaders have in common that helps them stand out and have organizations that really thrive? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to Women Leaders on the Move, a Her C-Suite radio podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Benamou, and every week I have the incredible opportunity to meet leaders that share their insights and help you, the listener, with your careers and your lives. I'm also the founder of Her C-Suite, a portfolio career company where we focus uniquely on women in the second half of our careers. We are also the expert company that is focused on building what's next, especially as it relates to AI with Next to Lead AI, our newest council recently launched. Today's guest is going to be sharing incredible insights that you can apply today. Selena Rezvani helps people show up, speak up, and shake up the way work gets done. She's a Wall Street Journal bestselling author and LinkedIn learning instructor. Forbes named her the premier expert on standing up for yourself at work. And I know that her new book, Quick Leadership, Build Trust, Navigate Change, and Cultivate Unstoppable Teams, will help many of you as you think about the year to come. So let's get started with this conversation now. Selena, I'm so excited to welcome you to Women Leaders on the Move today. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Natalie, and just for all that you do to elevate women. It's awesome.
Same back at you. And I'm so excited to talk with you. Now you've got 4 books out in the world, in the marketplace. And I, of course, was researching you and looking at all the things. And I'm curious, and I know our listeners are going to be too. What got you into this space of wanting to help and support and advise women leaders? Was there anything in your career that was a pivotal moment that got you so passionate about these topics that you've been writing about?
Yes, there really was a moment. And I think even as a little kid, if I go back, I had a real interest in women who were powerful and who were at ease, Natalie, with that power. So not ambivalent, but kind of seemed comfortable with that power. And so when I was working as a management consultant on talent development kind of issues, I got my MBA at night. And I was so fortunate to be in a program where I could do a little research and direct the topic. And I said, I know just what I want to do. I want to interview C-level women leaders. But there's only one problem. I don't know a single one, and I don't have a single connection who knows one of those people. But I just felt really sad, honestly, at how we were studying businesses and leaders, and the tiniest amount were women. It just didn't match my reality and certainly not my ambition. And it stung. So I thought, let me find these unicorns. And I had one female professor at Johns Hopkins, and she said, Selena, I'll approve your research on one condition. You have to go after the giants, she said, the women who you think won't even read your email. Thank goodness for her, Dr. Lindsay Thompson, because I did what she said, and so many wonderful women said yes. The CEO of the Washington Post, president of the LA Dodgers, incredible women, 30 interviews later. It had really changed my life, and I thought this could help other women. That's what became my first book, my focus. Sometimes having someone nudge you like that to think bigger, it can change your life. And it did for me.
It really can. And I think when you have that encouragement, the barriers of in your mind of saying, well, she's not going to say yes. But the thing is, you're no worse off. My background is sales. And so I always will tell myself if I ever have that moment of like, oh, what if? And it's like, well, it's not going to be any different than this moment right now because you don't have the interview. So it's not going to change anything if there's no answer, there's no, but how awesome that you got 30 to say yes in those conversations. And the things that you learned, were there stepping stones then that kind of led you along the path of leadership?
Yeah, it was 2009, so it's like quite the memory trip to kind of go back there and think about those moments. But there were some interesting findings, and I think one of them was that these women talked so much about the necessity of advocating for themselves, not once a year in a big business deal or job offer conversation, but like every day self-advocacy, taking a strong position on a certain idea or backing a colleague that you really believe in, nominating somebody who's junior for a promotion, like all these little ways, disagreeing when you think that the direction is not right. And that really struck me as this core leadership skill that came out of those interviews. So much so that it's what I made my second book about pretty much exclusively, and it's probably been across my career what I've presented on most to women audiences, how to be that fierce self advocate. And that second book was called Pushback, all about ways to stand up and ask for what you want.
And now fast forward to today. How have things changed going forward? Your book is really towards the today leader and advice for today's leader, and the things are changing so fast. What are some of the things that you have found as you were writing that book that you really have to think about now that's different? I mean, we didn't have Zoom, in 2009, that wasn't a thing, and it's crazy to think about, right? That we're here on a video conference as we're recording this, but so much has changed in the world. And now, and I love the title of your book. So it makes me think like, oh, I could just get this advice really fast.
That's right. The book's called Quick Leadership, and I have a preference in my own life. Maybe it's being a working mom, just a busy human, towards short, digestible things. And that's something I really wanted to give people in terms of format, something they could use as a reference if they wanted, something they could pick up and put down. That's really what I have. But one of the big shifts I noticed that's different today is the disproportionate impact that managers and leaders have on people at work. There was a study that came out by UKG that really stuck with me, and it said managers have an impact on employees' mental health that is on par with their spouse and greater than a person's therapist or doctor. This is not an inconsequential relationship. It really can define your work experience and therefore your life, a big section of your life. Combine that with employee skepticism, which is a lot higher right now. I think there's a kind of crisis of trust at work. And it was a big motivator for me to write this book about how to be that manager who can create trust in little ways, using quick tips, because this is not something most of us have a lifetime to learn. And it doesn't need to be bureaucratic and long and overthought. It's something we can do in these small day to day actions.
As you think about those moments, and I know you talk about meetings, and I think that's the thing that people are probably the most overburdened with. And it can be the manager. There can be behaviors where there could be a toxic rock star that's acting out and sabotaging and nothing is said. I hear about that all the time where just recently I had someone tell me a situation where she was presenting and the general manager just sort of was like, "Why are we even doing this? This is a bad idea." And for her, she interpreted that, "Oh, I'm not a good presenter." And I said, "No, that was just bad leadership of them telling you to do this project that you did. And then no one said anything in this meeting. And that just broke my heart." I think that's what you're talking about, right? These moments. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I tell leaders that I coach or when I'm giving trainings on this, that if your meetings are silent, then your people are managing you more than they are getting ready to give a contribution or being able to shine, right? And contribute their best. They are managing you. They are making mental calculations about what's feared, what's rewarded, whose toes they may step on. And that's the opposite of the environment you want for innovation, for creativity, for ownership, a sense of ownership on a team. And so there's a few things you can do. And one is go out of your way to not speak in declaratives, as though everything is established, final, conclusive. Let people be part of the process. Be willing to introduce it more at the first draft level. People don't like a monologue or just to be told this is how it is. So, a simple thing is letting your people be part of the process, moving from this is the direction we're going to take to what's your perspective on doing it this way. It's a small thing, but major impacts to your people in terms of respect.
I think it's that leadership buy-in piece where you're getting people ahead of time, especially if there's an initiative where you're not really sure where it's going to land, is having those one-to-ones in advance, get the ground swelling up. And what should someone do if in that process they might have some obstacles that they weren't expecting, and maybe there's not enough time to make the adjustment, or it could be like right before the hallway conversation or virtual hallway conversation of like, oh yeah, you know what? I understand that you came up with this, but we've shifted or there's a pivot. What are some things that you're thinking about in terms of those quick leadership moments to make adjustments to be more ready and agile in those moments?
Well, one of them is to not expect yourself in moments of change to have all the answers. And I don't know about you, but I certainly grew up with this idea that leaders should be like oracles. They should know it all. They should have the answers and solutions. And so it's taken some undoing for me to redefine leadership in a more human, modern way. So part of it is challenging yourself from being this oracle to being a resourcer. It is not your job to know all the answers and predict the future flawlessly. It is your job as a leader to resource your people, to equip them to think critically, to find the material resources they might need, to make the intros to people who are expert and can help them deal with a certain problem. And even on a little micro level, I teach a little exercise for managers and leaders called Ask Three Before You Answer. So if someone were coming to you, say in a time of change or conflict or discomfort, the client's unhappy with X, what should I do? Now, you could swoop in and give the answer. Maybe even in 1 minute you could. But I would challenge you instead to ask them some questions. Let them use their muscles, their problem solving muscles, some autonomy granting questions like, what's your instinct on where to go next with this? Or what have you tried so far in managing this? What solution do you see as making the client happiest? Again, small shift for the leader, huge to the receiver who is building their confidence, their sense of ownership over their work, and of course, their problem solving skills.
And as you rise in an organization and become a senior leader and even get into the C-suite or on a board, that mindset shifts a little bit, but you're still needing to have that communication piece. You're still needing to be able to help communicate the message and also have them think independently. As you get further into those senior rooms, what have you seen that shifts, with those conversations where it's the behind the scenes where the executive committee is meeting or prepping in for that really super executive board meeting? What are some of the things that you see that work in those instances?
One of the things you can do is flex your advocacy skills for the people who have much less of a voice than that board member sitting in that room, right? Who has quite a bit of voice and power and status, honestly. But to use it as a chance to be that guardian for your people, that is something I've seen work really well. And I actually have a cheeky term in this book that I encourage managers and leaders to be a role that they play, and it's being the shit umbrella, being willing to be that buffer between chaos, stress, noise, distractions that are going to hit your people. It's not a question of if, it's when and which distractions. So using that time to advocate for your people, to really represent your people, to bring the voice of your people into those conversations, because they can feel very separate from the front line.
And for those leaders that are on that front line and they have 100 people, 50 people, 1,500 people, you said earlier, we don't realize the impact that we have on the people around us. And I don't know who said it, but people leave managers, they don't leave the company, right? And so if you are observing the kind of behavior that I was telling you earlier, as a leader, it's an opportunity to support someone. What are some things that you talk about, or what are some observations and key strategies people can start to implement?
Yeah, I think one of them is really creating that psychologically safe environment within your team. Okay, so that people aren't doing the thing we talked about earlier, which is constantly calculating, is this too risky for me to speak up about? That I disagree, that I have a concern, that this makes me uncomfortable, that that timeline's unrealistic. You want to cultivate that in your team. We know it's related to high performance, but it's something that you as a leader model, and you set the tone and the pace for that. And some of the things you can do to create more of that are invite people's kind of first drafts. So you're reducing perfectionism on your team. And some cultures are more perfectionistic than others. So you're not saying this idea I'm asking you for has to be polished and fully vetted and researched. No, you're saying, give me your best first draft idea on this. So you're normalizing iteration. That's a very simple thing you can do. A huge one that I know means a lot to me personally, talking about your mistakes for the greater learning. Not just so they learn, but so they also can normalize failure and mistakes to a degree. That it's part of learning and having a growth mindset and acquiring new skills. I write in my book, Quick Leadership, lots of examples that are fertile for sharing your mistakes, like a time you undercommunicated, a time maybe you assumed no news was good news, a time maybe you failed to set boundaries, and maybe you promised a stakeholder the world and you were kind of really regretting that. Sharing those moments, it goes such a long way with your people. So that also requires us letting go of some of those old school images of leadership, that you should be infallible and somehow never let them see you sweat. If that's what you came up with, you're going to have to challenge some of those ideals to do this, to be a more human, people first leader.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, first of all, is that fail fast, mentality. But then you have to share it authentically with the team and say, it brings in the human side of us, and it creates that empathy for the receiver to say, oh, you know what? It's okay because she had something similar. So I know that I can try. And if I fail, it's safe for me to fail. That safety you were talking about. For leaders who maybe their team is great, but their company, the culture, like they're the island and the culture isn't always reflective of that. What could they do across an organization to try to infuse more of that positivity?
Well, I think one is don't decide unilaterally from the top what to do and implement. It doesn't matter if it's benefits or it's more of a cultural vision, mission type of thing. And this is especially important for Gen Z, who is going to be a third of the workforce by 2030. They grew up in a very participatory world, if you think about it, from social media to gaming to like school projects, very group oriented and again, participative. Imagine growing up like that, where you're shaping outcomes in real time, to joining a workplace where emails are written like directives. Meetings are sometimes monologues where maybe your input is dismissed. I mean, there's a real rub there. So I think we need to make it more participative, not just for Gen Zs, but involving people in solutions and directions. I run focus groups around culture for some organizations. And it's such a satisfying process to see the people themselves that work there. And it's always a mix of employees, not one level, come up with the solutions themselves. They often know best. Here's what we could do. Here's how we should implement it to fit our culture. So I think employee voice, don't lock yourselves in that executive conference room and think that's enough. It's usually not.
When people understand the direction, even if there's a challenge, they feel more at ease with the outcome. If you're incrementally, even if you're just saying, we don't know yet, but we're working on it. What strategy would you suggest to our listener if they are looking forward to the new year and they're planning and they want to get a leg up on their strategy for meetings and their strategy for leadership? What's one thing that they can try and take action on?
Be sparing with meetings if you're not. Cultures vary with that. Some people, some places have a meeting for any idea you want to talk about. Others are more careful and discerning. Be that person, be that force within your organization or team. Be sparing, challenge people to have 20-minute meetings when it makes sense. But really err on the side of less is more because you're protecting your people when you do that and you're role modeling that they should do the same, that their energy is finite. There's only so much in a day. Another thing you can do is get your people talking in the first 5 minutes of a meeting. When you think about that future and that 2026, how could you get people talking early? Because often, what do? If you don't do this, they look to the leader and default to them and they get their listening hats on. I'm going to sit here and be told. So invite them early. You know, gang, we're here to talk about X today. What's one word that comes to mind when you think of X? I want to hear from each of you. Even a small thing like that, like a really small contribution, but we know from research they're more likely to contribute later if they speak in that first 5 minutes. And it feels more collaborative. It feels less like a lecture. And one more thing I'd say, a little thing, divvy up who speaks. I'm a big fan and share a lot in Quick Leadership about power sharing rather than power hoarding. And a really little simple way is to give people on your team some of the meetings to run that you run, or give them a slice of the agenda. We're going to hear from so and so with the project update. It takes some burden off you, but you really are helping them with their own leadership and ownership.
I think it gives them the opportunity to speak. I'm a big proponent of giving people that voice. So people talk about, how do I become a speaker? Well, first it starts with a question. Ask a question. You're already speaking. Then it's get on the agenda. Now you're speaking more. Then it's become a subject matter. So there's these little incremental things from what I'm hearing that you're talking about, that it's just start, whether you're the leader with the meeting, or if you're in the meeting or planning for it, take initiative and ask to be on the agenda.
And what a great thing to make normal on your team. Then, when you are out on vacation for a week and the meeting needs to happen, it's no big deal. They already know how to carry on.
Which is really important for leaders to know, that they, both for the team and for the leader, to take a break. Everybody wins with a break. Oh my gosh, I love all the things that you're doing. Where can people find you and find out about? I know we're on LinkedIn, but if people want to know more about you and the amazing things you're doing, what's the best place for them to find you?
Come visit me at my website. It's selenarezvani.com. And my username is Selena Rezvani on all the different social media platforms. I post leadership videos 5 days a week. So I'd love you to join me, follow along, comment, and let me know what you want to hear more of. And the book is called Quick Leadership. It's available everywhere books are sold.
So good. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Me too, Natalie. Thank you. And thank you for amplifying women.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. I really appreciate all of you. We have listeners in 40 countries around the world, and I know that you have taken time out of your day to listen. I appreciate it so much. If you found this episode helpful, would you share it with a friend or colleague and help her along her journey, especially as it relates to leadership? And I would really love it if you would rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. It's how other people find us. This is a time of year where people are figuring out what's next and deciding their future. And it's a time for reflection as well as a time to look forward. If you are navigating any sort of change or thinking about big ideas, I would love to welcome you in her C-suite. Visit us at hercsuite.com and find out about our mastermind programs, our Next to Lead AI, and also the curated programs we do for organizations, helping you build what's next with boards, your business, and portfolio career. As always, I want to encourage you, keep shining your light bright. The world needs you.